So you've been doing photography for a little while, building your skills and getting better every single day. And now you're thinking about how you might start to make a living doing what you love doing. If you're watching this video, you may need a little bit of help, which is fair enough, because honestly, this entire field is so confusing. There are so many different ways to go about this, and some methods are most certainly much better than others. So settle in, because in this video, I'm going to be talking about 11 different ways that you as a photographer or a videographer can start to make money doing what you love doing. And you know what? We haven't done a tier list in a while on channel, so that's how this video is going to be formatted, tier list style. I'm going to go through 11 different ways that I've had experience personally making money as a photographer. I'm going to teach you about the pros and the cons of each method, and then we'll rank them on a tier list. I'll share my favorite method at the very end of the video, so stick around for that. Now, before we dive into the tier list, here are some caveats. Caveat number one. Money is always going to be different in terms of course, financial value to everyone, but also money is going to be different in terms of cultural value and psychological value to everyone as well. So when you're watching this video, please keep all of that in mind. To frame everything, I'm going to be talking about money through the context of a Western first world perspective. So think America, Canada, UK, Australia, that kind of vibe. The kind of context where $1,000 might be a quarter of what a normal monthly wage might be. Caveat number two. This video isn't really for beginners. And while a lot of my videos are more targeted to the beginner in their first few years, this video is more targeted to those people who have been photographing for a few years now and have actually built up their skills and proved it with experience. It's the kind of skill where, 50 random average people would all say that your images are great, rather than the kind of skill where only your family or your close friends would bother to remark on them. You have to develop some skill set to be able to sell before you're able to sell anything. So if you're in your first few years doing photography and you're watching this, please keep this in mind and work towards improving that skill set first. Caveat number three, there are a lot of different ways to make money. And these are just 11 of the many, many different ways that I've personally experienced doing it. And by that nature, it is, of course, subjective. So please do not take this as a definitive list by any means, but it should be good enough to inspire some action if this is where you're at in your photography journey. Now, finally, with all of those caveats out of the way, let's dive into the tier list. So, you know what a tier list is. We go from S tier to F tier. S tier being the tippity top must-do activities, and F tier being the worst of the worst activities not to be touched with a 10-foot pole and rubber gloves. And the first item is freelance photography. Now, when I talk about freelance photography, I'm referring to you as a photographer, trading your time and your skills and your experience to go out and do a job performing those skills in a project by project, self-instigated manner. When I say freelance photography, I'm talking about, picking up event photography jobs, real estate photography gigs, right? Doing retouching as a service, doing portraits as a service for people in pretty much any different setting, all of those kinds of different services. Freelance photography is the quintessential image of what people think you do when you say, I do photography for a living. It's the traditional route in many ways, and from my perspective, it's also one of the hardest ways to make a living as a photographer. Now, I personally think that the hardest part of freelance photography is actually just marketing and selling yourself and doing all the prep work to find the client and the job in the first place. It can be extremely tiring cold calling all the time, cold emailing, networking, constantly trying to find new clients. And at this freelance stage of your career, you're doing everything by yourself and you're wearing all of the hats, juggling all of the things that need to be done: sales, advertising, finance, let alone the actual production, producing, and servicing of the actual deliverables in the first place. It's a long play. But once you start to build up a list of clientele and start to develop a good portfolio for yourself, things will start to roll and the momentum will build, and the upside is largely only capped by the amount of work that you can possibly handle yourself. Now, projects may initially start at, let's say, a few $100s each and then progress up to a few $1,000s, and then from there, maybe even 5 figures per job. For most people, doing just a few jobs per month is enough to make a decent living, and for that reason, freelance photography gets an A tier. Although, for me personally, it is close to a B tier. It is a great way to make a living if you enjoy this style of work. It's not for me personally, but most photographers do this to some degree, so it is hard to give this anything less than an A. Now, the upgraded version of this, however, is turning your services into a business and then scaling all of that up, hiring staff, teaching them your skills so that they can perform the actual service for you. And when you have 5 people doing the same thing that you're doing, that means you can charge 5 times the amount of money because you have 5 times the amount of work, right? You can start to scale and scale and scale. And this is where the magic happens when it comes to revenue, because there really is no limit to the upside that you can have. Now, keep in mind that this is a super, super long play, and that requires you to also, develop the skills of creating a successful business, but you can actually start freelancing first with the intention of turning into a business quite quickly. I personally love building businesses because it teaches you so many different skills across so many different domains. Marketing, sales, finance, it teaches you people skills. It changes how you approach the world when it comes to work in general. I've personally built 5 different businesses in my lifetime, and while not all of them were successful, every single time I do it, I learn a little bit more, I earn a little bit more, and I get closer and closer to my personal goals. And it is for this reason I give creating a business a solid S tier, because there is nothing quite like controlling your own destiny. And while that does, take you out of the craft of photography and doing that kind of stuff and pushes you more into the side of, running an actual business, eventually, if you do it right, it can also clear you up to do photography as a passion on the side again, if that's where you want to take it as well. You, as a business owner, get out of the business as much as you put in, and the only right way to do it is the way that you see fit, so you're clear to direct it as you want. But let's take this back a little bit, and let's say you aren't yet confident enough to do freelance on your own or create a business or anything like that. That is totally okay as well, because working for someone else as a photographer, doing something like being a second shooter for a wedding, or being a photographer for a fashion brand, or doing travel articles for a publication, or just being hired by a company to perform some kind of photography. All of those are absolutely fine ways to make a living as well. If anything, it's perhaps one of, I would say, the most predictable and stable methods of making a living as a photographer. Where if you're a freelancer, by comparison, the timing of your next paycheck is relatively unknown. When you work for a company, on the other hand, as a photographer, you're on a consistent salary and everything else is kind of largely taken care of. And that really allows you to, get into the work and dial into it. And it also allows you to get paid in the short term very quickly, as well as the long term as well, which is also very nice. Now, this kind of method will always involve having a good portfolio to show to potential employers, although most of these service-based methods also require one as well. And in many cases, it will also require you to learn a whole wide range of different skills to then roll into your photography as well. If you think about industries like travel, you would be photographing and then showcasing a destination or a story, but you would also be doing a write-up to go along with that at the same time. Or if you were working for a wedding photography company, you would also need to learn supplementary skills to help the wedding process move along, soft skills, hard skills, and so on. In many different ways, if you are looking to learn in a steady kind of manner, getting hired by a company is a great way to do it. However, I am only going to give this a B tier here because while the stability and the instant predictable salary is nice, your earning potential for the work that you do is capped. No matter how hard you work, no matter how smart you work as well, you'll only ever get paid what you're negotiated in your salary. And when compared to, let's say, going freelance or owning your own business, it's definitely not on the same level. So this one gets a B tier. Now, let's take a little bit of a detour here and talk about something a little bit more tactical. Stock photos. Now, if you rewind a bit, this is like everybody's dream like 10 years ago. The idea of wouldn't it be so cool to be able to just take photos at your own leisure and then dump them on a website and then have people buy them. And then, you can just sit on your nice balcony sipping drinks and watching the sunset and calling it a day. Well, let me be the bearer of bad news and just squash those dreams for you right now. See, that's the dream of, many, many people. And when a lot of people have the same idea, things get really, really competitive. Now, the truth of the matter is people who live off stock photos either got into it very, very early, or they're the kinds of photographers who spend specific full hours worth of time shooting for stock. This means that they're researching what terms people are looking for. They're shooting thousands and thousands of variations of the same thing, hoping that one of them will pop off. They're building sets for stock specifically. They're hiring actors for stock specifically, and so on and so forth. It is super, super competitive, and the chance of someone purchasing your holiday snapshots compared to someone who is doing it professionally full time with sets and models and all that kind of stuff is pretty damn low. It's just that there's kind of not a lot of money in it to begin with nowadays, and it requires so much effort that I personally don't think that the juice is worth the squeeze. Now, for that reason, I am giving stock photos an F tier. The first and the only in this entire list. Don't do it. Especially now with AI-generated images, photography as a utility is severely commoditized, and this industry will die out very, very soon. Don't jump into a sinking ship. Now, the next one up is licensing, and this one is quite hard to do unless you're, I would say, already quite an established photographer, but I'm including it in this list because I personally still do it and I still get quite a lot of income from it. But I know that I'm in a very privileged place, so I don't really recommend it for the beginner or the intermediate photographer to actively seek to build it. Now, licensing images simply means that a company or a person wants to use your images for a commercial benefit. Sometimes this involves you having your work out there already somehow on social media or on a portfolio or whatever, and then someone finding you and their purpose being aligned with your images. I've licensed dozens of images in my lifetime, from record labels and album covers and album artworks to digital travel campaigns, physical travel campaigns, billboards, hotel and apartment lobbies, internal brochures and documentation. Even right now, if you're in Australia, you can see my stuff all over camera retail shops where I am both in front of and behind the camera, all sorts of stuff. I don't bet any of it to come through. Never in my career have I been like, oh, damn, I really hope someone wants to use my images for something. When it comes specifically to licensing, I don't think it's something that you can really depend on as a stable form of income. If it comes in, that's nice, amazing, that's great. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. Also, the price of your licensing varies wildly depending on what kind of license it is, what the distribution is, and what the rights are as well. So it is completely unpredictable. And for that reason, it gets a solid D tier. Nice to have when it comes, but is a waste of time, in my opinion, to go out specifically and look to build that as a career for most people. Okay, let's talk about Instagram. Good old Instagram. Making money from Instagram has the prerequisite that it is not really from the skill specifically of you being a good photographer, but it is more so in how much you can play the algorithm game and build an audience to then monetize off of. Keep that in mind, because I would say that there are many photographers on Instagram who don't actually have a lot of artful skill of the craft of photography, but they do have the know-how of how to package up what they do have already into something that builds an audience, which is a skill all onto itself and not something to take lightly. But if you are interested in this path of building an audience and doing sponsored content, I would say that it's definitely a long road to get there, at least initially. But once you are there, especially if you're tenacious enough to do consistent outreach, you could have potentially sponsored posts coming out of your ass every single day and make more than enough from that alone. There is a lot of money in influencer marketing, and the world of KOLs and content creation and what have you is actually quite fun. Instagram as a platform itself is well established, and almost all marketing campaigns from all companies will include some component of Instagram on it. So there's plenty of budget to go around. Now, that being said, of course, there is a lot of competition, but honestly, most photographers don't really know how to advertise themselves that well or know how to price themselves well either. So it is very easy to stand out from the pack once you've got a decently sized audience. And for that reason, I'm giving this an A tier. It is worth building for the long term if you do it. And it is most certainly not a get rich quick kind of method, but it does open a tremendous amount of doors, at least it has for me, over the last 8 years, and it has been super fun as well. Along those lines, YouTube is just straight up S tier for me, and I think that's the case for most creators as well. I think most serious multi-skilled creators would put YouTube at the very top of the social media heap when it comes to making money, and not just for the AdSense payout that you get every single month, although that alone can certainly be enough for many creators to live off. There's something about putting yourself out there, putting your face and your personality and your presence out there on the internet for people to see, that allows people to build a bond with you that you just don't get on a platform like, say, Instagram or TikTok or X or whatever. You right now watching this 20+ minute video with me means that just by watching this one single video, you've spent more time and more attention with me than perhaps the entire lifetime of you following someone else's content on Instagram and perusing their images on reels split seconds at a time. By virtue of you knowing what I look like, seeing me talk, express, deliver value to you also means that I'm able to provide a deeper connection as a person, and in that way, hopefully I'm more trustworthy to you because I've been more vulnerable to you as well. And I know this doesn't sound like money talk, but it is those things that make the value of a YouTube audience far greater than Instagram or TikTok or X or whatever when it comes to the whole, being a person who has a respectable opinion thing on the internet. It is, however, one of the longest games you'll have to play. And you won't find success in it unless you stick with it consistently over a long period of time. But in my opinion, if you're only going to choose one social media platform, that is 100% YouTube, that's for sure. S tier for me, easily. Okay, let's move on to a more classic method for photographers, prints. Now, prints are nice because having your work made manifest in physical format just feels good. to me anyway. There is something really nice about knowing that your work is in the living room of someone's house. That people are walking by your works every single day when they wake up. Now, the problem with this as a method for making long-term money is that there are only so many people who have enough disposable income to decorate their walls. And there are so many artists out there competing for such a small amount of wall space. And while the margins on prints are fairly decent, and if you set it up right, they're also relatively hands-free, and head on over to patk.com/prints if you want to get some of mine, it is very difficult to create a full-time living just out of prints alone. Just watch out for that. It is doable. When, I walk out to any city, I can always spot at least a few photography, print, or fine art shops. But it is difficult to start out unless you've already made a name for yourself as an artist, as a photographer, as a videographer, what have you. I have friends who have had quite a lot of success by lowering the price of their images and selling them en masse. And then I've had a lot of friends who have continually tried so many different things to try and sell their prints for many, many years and never seem to catch any traction. With prints, you kind of have to have all of the right components of, the right style and mainstream appeal, price, availability, status, marketing to make it all work well. But it is definitely doable. Would I recommend it? Probably not. For your effort, you could probably do something else that would make you even more money for the time you would spend getting this up and running to a proper full-time scale. And for that reason, I give it a C tier. It's a nice side thing to set up and to do and to get some, side income every now and then. But I don't personally think it's great to pursue as a full-time thing. Okay, next. Commercial is what it sounds like. It is the exchange of your service of photography for doing something for a commercial purpose. Whether that be working on a tourism board on a campaign, or working with your favorite tech brand for an ad, or doing some work in the kitchen for a food publication. If it is doing work for a company or a brand and it is commercial in nature, and it's generally of a larger scope and a larger scale than what you would normally do, say doing freelance or running a business or what have you, that is what I am referring to. This is kind of a mix, but also a sidestepping, I guess, a little tangent of freelancing or building your own business. And I'm breaking it out from those as something different completely because most of the time, at least in my experience and the clients that I work with and, the many creative friends that I have who I've spoken to, the budget and the money and the deliverables are always quite different when it comes to commercial. The budgets are usually the highest, and I'm talking, 5-6 digits here for a campaign. And then the deliverables are usually far more clearly documented and well thought out. There's always a higher goal or objective that you're striving towards. And usually there's a team and more people involved for commercial jobs. There's a high chance that you will be working directly with a team, all working to get a particular objective done. Now, these kinds of jobs are quite difficult to come by and do require a lot of relationship building and networking to even get in the first place. But again, if you're the kind of person who is relentless in pursuing a new client and meeting new people, this kind of approach might just be the one for you. After all, the money and the budget when it comes to commercial work is most certainly worth the squeeze because you are dealing with much larger companies who have the marketing budget to spend. And because of that reason, it is a very solid S tier activity for me. If you do get a solid list of clients on a retainer, or you start to build really good relationships with the brand managers at a couple of companies, just a few jobs is all you need to really have a really profitable year. It is most certainly worth chasing, in my opinion. All right, now teaching is something that I'm super passionate about, but this specific entry refers to things like hosting workshops, either online or in person, and doing things like seminars and panels and live streaming and hosting events and all sorts of stuff like that, where you're present and delivering something of value right then and there. Now, these kind of events can be really lucrative, and I know a lot of people and myself have done this in the past who create yearly retreats where you go to a particular travel destination for like a week or something and engage in the organized photography activities all day, every day. And it's a great adventure experience for everyone who attends and for you to get amazing photos and, make new friends out of it. And these destination workshops are perhaps the more expensive luxury end of things, and they work really well. But you can also do smaller events where you host small workshops with more targeted, specific activities for, let's say, a few hours or something as well. Now, sometimes you might even get paid to talk about something at an event or run a workshop live on behalf of a brand or something like that. And those can be really good fun as well. In this specific method of earning money, again, I'm talking to teaching in a service-based way where you're trading real life time and experience for said money. Because of this, all of this, I give this method an A tier. Now, keep in mind that with this method, you really do need to know your stuff, or at least be at the advanced or the pro level to really know how to teach it and to put on something that people will enjoy and get value of. But if you do, you can really make a lot of money with this method. All right, now we are at our last method of how to make money as a photographer. My personal favorite method, digital products. Now, here's the thing when it comes to making money. There is really only two main ways to do it. You are either trading your experience and your time and trading that for money, as in a service, or you are using your experience and your time to create a product, and it is that product that makes you money. Now, for me, I love this the most because it provides the most amount of time freedom. You do something once, and if you are good at marketing, your product makes you money while you sleep. And this is in stark contrast to anything service-based where you have to deal with, clients and deadlines and budgets. With products, you do everything once and you send it out into the world, and mostly that's it. Sometimes you come back and you refine the product and continue to make it better and all sorts of things. But by and large, with products, you are no longer trading your time for money. And that, to me, is more valuable than anything else in the world. If you have some kind of knowledge of value, packaging all of that up into something that you can sell, and then learning the skill of marketing to then sell it is such an easy way to distribute your value that you have to the world at scale. Photographers and creators commonly do things like selling presets and LUTs to other creators, or they create ebooks and courses and all sorts of other fun stuff, because these are all fantastic, great places to get started. Now, the problem with digital products is that there are so many crappy, low value, low effort products out there by people who just want to make a quick buck. These kinds of people don't really have a care for how their users, their customers, receive their product or what value they get out of it. They're just in it for the money. And as a former product designer, that's something I'm so violently against. On the flip side, that means that if you are going to make a product as a photographer, whether that's guides or presets or courses or whatever, by simply making sure that it is the best thing that you can possibly make with the highest quality and with the value to the customer front of mind, it becomes super easy to stand out in what is honestly a very low quality, low effort market. So always do your best and let your product speak for itself. And hey, if you want examples of my presets, guides, and courses, you can always head to patk.com/store to check those out. Okay, that's the tier list. And now I want to hear from you. What do you think about these methods and which ones resonate with you? What kind of methods are you guys using for yourself? Let me know in the comments below, and maybe you might find some different ideas from your fellow creators. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. But until then, get out there and make something that matters. Peace.